I can get the thoughts now of Charles Kupchan, who's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, but who also served as a senior director for National Security Council under President Obama. Good afternoon to you, Charles.
Hi, John. Good to be back with you.
Right, I'm going to start with Ukraine. It's lovely to have you with us. There seems to have been some hopes raised, back when Donald Trump's, well, it depends on what you mean by hope, could stop the Russia invasion of Ukraine quickly. Well, that didn't quite work out according to those hopes. Alexander Kara was previously an advisor to the Ukrainian defense minister and was less optimistic.
Many Ukrainians hoped that he would proceed from the position of strength by imposing additional costs on Russia because its aggression against Ukraine, strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities, and trying to negotiate just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Unfortunately, it didn't come true. Vice versa, the Trump administration disregards the key national interests of Ukraine, saying that Ukraine will not be able to recover its internationally recognized borders. Moreover, Donald Trump considers a legal recognition of the illegally annexed Crimea, which would not only constitute the break with the long-standing U.S. diplomatic tradition not to recognize the violent change of borders, but would undermine the key pillars of international law relating sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Trump administration is not interested in providing Ukraine with any security guarantees. Donald Trump ruled out any possibility of Ukraine to become a NATO member in the future. Neither the Trump administration is interested in providing security assistance to Ukraine beyond the one that was voted by the previous Congress and allocated by the previous president. The Trump administration and Trump himself blamed Ukraine for starting this war back in 2022. So we are not happy with the course of action of this administration. We believe that the Russians are not ready to stop this war while they have such an ally, de facto ally in Washington.
Right. I mean, obviously, an enormous amount of skepticism, to put it mildly, about Russia's intentions. Hard to argue that that's justified. But Charles, I mean, you're a former advisor to the former president, Barack Obama. Donald Trump, he never addresses this subject, either when he speaks or when he posts on social media, which he does an awful lot, without saying, look, Barack Obama was there when the Russians moved into Crimea and nobody lifted a finger. He blames Obama. He blames the response then. How do you answer that, Charles?
Well, Trump blames anything that he doesn't like on somebody else, whether it's Barack Obama or Joe Biden or the president of Mexico or the prime minister of Canada. So I would take that with a grain of salt. But I do believe that Trump has done the right thing by reaching out to Putin. This is a war that Ukraine's not going to win. I think Biden should have tried to negotiate with the Russians when he was still in office. And as a consequence, Trump is picking up the slack, and he's started a dialogue with the Russians that needs to take place. And I also think that Trump is doing the right thing by recognizing that Ukraine, at least for now, is not going to get back those parts of Ukraine occupied by Russia. But other than that, it's been a mess from the get-go. The problem is that Trump has an instinct, an impulse to end the war, but he doesn't have a plan. And that's why this rollout of his effort has been such a mess.
But was it within the power of Joe Biden then to do more to stop this developing into what we see now, the full-blown invasion of Ukraine? Could that have been nipped in the bud?
Well, could it have been prevented through diplomacy? We'll never know. I don't know what went on behind the scenes between the United States and Russia in late 2021. My guess is it probably was not stoppable because Putin made clear that he had vast war aims, including subjugating Ukraine and rolling back the post-Cold War order. But I do think that Biden should have tried some point during his final 2 years to bring this war to an end when Ukraine was in a stronger position. It would have had a more leverage at the negotiating table. Instead, what we see now is the Russians are gaining ground. Trump is undercutting Zelensky by screaming at him in the Oval Office when he needs to be supporting Zelensky to increase his leverage. So, I'm sort of cautiously hopeful that we may get to the finish line and that we may get an agreement, but it is not being handled well by the Trump administration.
Okay, in a nutshell then, because you're not the only one saying this, you think there's at least a possibility, maybe even a fair possibility, that we will end up in an agreement in Ukraine. What is that going to look like? What are going to be the terms of that broadly?
Well, I think we know one half of the agreement, and that is that you freeze the front line where it is on the day that the agreement is reached, that the 20% of Ukraine that is occupied by Russia will for now stay under Russian occupation. What we don't see, because nobody's really been speaking about it, is what happens to the 80% of Ukraine that is free, that is still controlled by Kyiv. And I think that's what we need to know more about, because the key is if that 80% of Ukraine can emerge as a success story, gets continued aid from the US and Europe, turns into a stable, defensible, secure, prosperous Ukraine, I would call that a success story, because it would end the war on terms that leaves Ukraine, even though with only 80% of its territory, free and able to make decisions about its future.
And many people would say that would be a desirable outcome. It would also need, wouldn't it, for President Trump to do and say what he has not done or said so far, which is that America would be there giving a security guarantee to try and to preserve the integrity of free Ukraine in the shape that it's in when the ceasefire comes about. So far, Donald Trump doesn't seem to be there. The best that he's offering is a deal on minerals, which he seems to be arguing would be as good as a security guarantee. Arguably, it would not. Can you see the president giving that ground, that final crucial piece of ground, Charles, coming as you do from the other side of the aisle?
I can't see Trump extending a security guarantee, nor do I think he should. I think for now, Ukraine has a path to EU membership, but not a path to NATO membership. But I do think that Trump has to come out and say, Mr. Putin, you need to understand that if we're going to get an agreement here, it's hands off the rest of Ukraine. You don't have a veto over the size of Ukraine's armed forces. You don't have a veto on the future flow of American assistance to Ukraine. You get to keep for now what you have, but you need to understand that the rest of Ukraine is gone for good. Is Trump going to come out and say that either publicly or privately? I doubt it, but it's overdue.
All right. It's been good to get your thoughts, Charles. Thank you. Charles Kupchan there, who was a senior director for the National Security Council under President Barack Obama.